Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we have a special guest on the show, super excited about this one. We're joined by Jo Owen, who's an award-winning author, keynote speaker and social entrepreneur and founder of Teach First, the UK's largest graduate recruiter. Welcome to the show, Jo. How are you?
Very well. Very good to be with you.
How's it been? And for everyone just listening, you launched your book in September, right? Smart Work, the ultimate handbook for remote and hybrid teams. So I'm sure you've been a pretty busy man recently.
It's actually been a good pandemic. I'm not sure we're allowed to say such things, but it has been a voyage of discovery for me over the last year or so, doing all this research for the book remotely, appropriately. And it's actually been great and liberating because in all this darkness of the pandemic, where there's been so much gloom and doom, for very good reasons there's been gloom and doom, actually there's a very, very bright silver lining coming out from these clouds, which is that it looks like the pandemic may just be the very best thing to have happened to leadership and management in 200 years. Yeah. And that was a real surprise, but I think it's good news.
Yeah. And this isn't, for everyone listen, this isn't new to you, right? You've been working on some of these concepts for many years, and tell everyone about your background a bit more and the previous books and how that led to this one, because I found that really fascinating.
Yeah. So my last two books, one was called Global Teams in a very imaginative way. You have to figure out what that was about, which came about because I'd been working on global teams and I couldn't find any advice on how to make them work. So I landed up sort of writing the book. And global teams, of course, are essentially remote teams on steroids. They're remote teams where the rest of your team is on a different time zone, different language and different culture. So it was a kind of perfect setup for looking at remote and hybrid working. And then the very latest book was Resilience, again, an imaginative title. You have to try and work out what that was about. But that was looking at how people survive adversity. And those two books, as it happened, were the perfect setup for writing about remote teams. So when the pandemic came along, I kind of felt compelled to write about it. And I also found myself leading two organizations through the pandemic. So this was kind of very opportune. I was able to sort of research the organizations, but the organizations were also able to benefit from the research. So it was kind of real time putting research into practice as well.
When you mentioned two companies, these are your own companies?
They're two NGOs that I founded, so I don't own them because I'm the founder and chair of them. One's global and one's UK based. And like many other organizations, we basically had to reinvent ourselves overnight. We all thought, we'd never even imagined
same here,
working from home.
Yeah. And
then overnight we were all working from home and it was far better and worse than before.
Doing the research and obviously speaking to people, and just kind of we've all kind of had an outside view of how companies have been reacting to this and the decisions they're making. What are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing companies make or challenges they're facing throughout this?
I'd put several challenges down, which is both good and bad. Let me just give you three to start with, okay? Yeah. Change, management is much harder than ever before, and the whole well-being issue. So let's look at those in turn. Change, we discovered that firms are capable of far more change far faster than we ever thought before. If we go back to the pre-pandemic world, we were all patting ourselves on the back, saying, we were changing faster than ever. We're adjusting to the digital economy. And then the pandemic hit, and suddenly the first 20 years of this millennium looked like a walk in the park compared to the scale and pace of change that we had to effect over more or less a weekend.
It's crazy,
and as
right?
Lenin said, there are decades when nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen. And we went through one of those revolutionary weeks when decades happen. So the challenge for HR leaders now, can you and should you sustain that pace of change? What are the other assumptions that we haven't even thought about challenging that need to be challenged? And how else should we be moving the firm forwards? Or do we simply stick with what we've got and stick into the comfort zone? In practice, comfort zones become very uncomfortable for people when the rest of the world is changing very fast. But the big problem is that although teams and individual team members worked miracles, minor or major, to make change happen at the start of the pandemic, what we're seeing now is that a lot of team members are really feeling change, burnout, and stress. So change was relatively easy to achieve in the crisis of the pandemic. That scale of change is going to be a lot harder to achieve unless people feel there is a real crisis or real opportunity that they need to respond to in future, which kind of leads us to the well-being challenge that I referenced in one of the 3 challenges there. I think that we have discovered that well-being is not a nice to have, it is a must have. And in the pandemic, I think a lot of people have really struggled. They've struggled from being away from the social structure of the office. They've struggled working from home because they've discovered that when you work from home, you never leave work. And although output hasn't suffered, actually productivity has gone down and people are just working longer to compensate. They feel they're always on. For communication, they're on call 24/7. And so there's been a complete loss of boundaries. And one of the things that firms and HR leaders in particular can do is help teams and individuals rediscover appropriate boundaries for when they should be working, when they should be available for communication, and when they should actually be resting and recuperating, which is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I made that mistake early on myself where I didn't, because every single one of our routines disappeared overnight that we had established. And I found myself, waking up, working, it was dark outside, and finishing work and it's dark outside, and I haven't even left my chair, and my anxiety came back, I had a panic attack. All of my well-being went downhill very, very quickly.
And this is particularly acute for professionals because there are 2 characteristics of professional work. One is professionals like to do a good job, so they're always wanting to overachieve and prove to themselves, if you sort of mean. And the second bit is professional work is ambiguous. I mean, if you're asked to write a report, it could be 1 page or 100 pages long, but there's always another view you could canvass and another fact you could check. So now, when you're working remotely, you're doing ambiguous work, which actually can stretch forever, and you want to overachieve. So suddenly the professionals go into complete overdrive and they're working nonstop. In the office, you're able to walk across to another desk and say, look, what do you think? Does this look right? Oh, okay, should I do something else? Oh, this is enough. Fine. And it's done. But you don't have that constant checking and chit-chat that you get in the office. Instead, you're constrained by these very formal Zoom calls, which are kind of okay, but they miss that constant interaction, that ad hoc side of management, which actually is devastatingly effective.
And to add to that as well, right, you also have in the office, you have those social cues of when the day begins and ends. Whereas when you're at home, it's just one blurred line of when your day starts or ends, or even, the natural cue that my team will walk past in the office and say, let's go for lunch. And it's that cue that you leave your desk and you go for lunch and go for a walk outside. They all disappeared.
These boundaries, these rhythms and routines are really important. So let me give you 2 ways that I've seen people respond at the level of the team and at the level of the individual. So I've seen a great response from some individuals. They've recreated their commute. So if they're working from home, they get up in the morning and they leave their house and they go for a 5-minute walk around the block. And when they come back, they're coming back into their office and they're on. And then when they finish for lunch or for the end of the day, they go out again, have another 5-minute commute. And when they come back, all the work is cleared away and they're home. And it's like recreating the commute that we all love to hate, but the commute creates a lovely boundary. So that's what some individuals have done. And I love it as a little technique. What I've seen teams do, look, teams evolve their kind of rules of engagement, their rhythms, routines, their boundaries, as you say, very naturally, very ad hoc in the office. You just pick it up by osmosis.
Exactly.
You can't do that remotely. So what you have to do, you can't do ad hoc management remotely. You have to be much more purposeful and deliberate in everything you do. So for the team has to create new rules of engagement. You can't do that by trial and error. You have to get the team together to kind of create a little bit of a team charter where you go, well, when are we going to work? What hours are we going to work? When are we going to be available for meetings and communication? And actually you do that. And what I've seen some teams do is lovely. They say core working hours 10 to 3, right? Which sounds very little. But then what you see families do, carers do, is they're making up the rest of the time, like 7 till 8 o'clock in the morning, and maybe 8 till 10 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
But they've got a lot of other time where they can do their caring activities. So it's kind of really weird day. But the key is the whole team needs to agree that and stick to it.
Yes, that's the hard
part. So that
part.
you're not getting called to meetings at 10 o'clock in the evening, or you're not being expected to answer emails at antisocial hours. You know, it's like the whole team needs to agree. And incidentally, you know, the leadership, HR leaders need to role model that as well. Because otherwise it just breaks down. And that should be great for diversity. In theory, but in practice, I think we may be seeing a diversity crunch coming along, because what is happening as firms get to come back to the office, a lot of firms are being very generous and saying, look, yeah, you come back when you want and when you're ready. And that sounds great, doesn't it? And it's leading to a disaster, because what is happening is that the blokes, the people who don't have caring responsibility, are coming back in their droves, or much quicker than the people who do have caring responsibilities. And that means that when they're in the office, all the normal things happen. They're the people who are in the flow of all the information. They can see the good projects, good opportunities coming along. They can see the Death Star projects and which they should avoid. They're able to influence and persuade people informally in the corridor. And all the people who are stuck at home are out of the loop, which means that they actually get stuck in career terms. So when we come back to the office, again, HR leaders are going to have to think about this, that a free-for-all can actually land up discriminating in quite unintended ways. So it has to be a very disciplined, purposeful and deliberate back to the office.
What do you think we can do to tackle this?
I think what we're seeing is a lot of firms now saying the whole team is in or the whole team is out. You can't have half in and half out. I was on a call yesterday with someone in a bank who was in, and the rest of and half the team was out, and he was vituperating against the people who were out, because they just, he's seeing them as slackers, not pulling their weight and everything like that. And meanwhile, he was talking about the very things you were mentioning about about pursuing all these opportunities which he was hearing about in the office and chasing down clients, etc. So as soon as you have a split team, you've got a problem. So I think what you have to do is kind of all in, all out by team, and then you've got to figure out which teams need to be in when, because obviously a lot of teams need to work together as well. So you're kind of playing three-dimensional chess.
It's tough, right? It's like so far away from it's huge. It's a huge transformation and culture shift.
But that's great, isn't it? I mean, who said management is easy? Right?
It's definitely a lot more challenging. Yeah.
So and actually, this has been the third finding of I've discovered in all this research. So we talked about change. We talked about well-being. So the last change is the obvious one, which we've discovered that everything is harder when you're managing remotely. Everything.
Yeah.
And that is actually brilliant news. That is fantastic.
Doesn't feel like that, Joe.
I know it doesn't feel like that. I'm just trying to be. Look, as a recovering pessimist here, I'm trying to be optimistic. Okay, so don't knock it.
I'm sure all the managers listening right now are like, Joe, yeah, you're not helping us right now, Joe.
So look, here's why it's good, because it's forcing managers to raise their game even further. If you can manage a remote team, you can manage any team. It's forcing people to be much better about all the disciplines of leadership and management. So, I mean, I don't know, goal setting as take motivation. I mean, look, first person to figure out how to motivate by email will make a fortune, and it's not a fortune that's likely to be made, is it? But let's take another one, goal setting, okay? Management 101, how do you set a goal? Within the office, actually it happens in an interesting way, because you're not just communicating the what needs to happen, you communicate the why it needs to happen in the context. And that doesn't happen in just one conversation. It happens in a whole series of conversations, very iteratively, where people come and say, what did you really mean by that? Why did you say that? Wasn't there an alternative? What about this? What about that? And so you get this constant iteration of the idea until people really understand not just the what, but the why and the context. Remotely, you can communicate the what. And you can communicate it, and then people don't get it. And then you get really frustrated and you go, but I told you what needs to happen. And the sort of the anxiety and annoyance rises on both sides. Why? Because the why hasn't been communicated and the context hasn't been communicated, because you don't have that constant set of ad hoc, iterative kind of communications about the goal that you would have very naturally have in the office. So all of that says if you're working remotely, you have to be much more purposeful and deliberate about how you go about doing things like that. And B, the office isn't dead. Yeah, it is good. You've got to come back to the office for a whole bunch of things. And communication and trust building is sort of very high on that list. Oh, and incidentally, communication. I mean, this is a real challenge remotely. We've all found it. We are communicating more than ever. We understand each other as little as ever. And one of the reasons that productivity has collapsed during this lockdown is that people are spending far too much time on Zoom. The formal communications have taken over. So again, what I'm seeing is that a lot of teams are now very focused on taming that communications beast. They're now starting the day with a team meeting where everyone gets 90 seconds to cover 3 topics. This is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm doing today, and this is where I need help. So in 90 seconds per team member, everyone knows what everyone else is doing. The team leader has a very good accountability mechanism. They're able to check, have people done yesterday what they said they were going to do, and they know where help is needed. Bang. And at that point, a lot of the communication that you need during the day is kind of sorted, and you can begin to tame that communication. Do you
think that's the best method then? Because it's interesting, because I was having this conversation with a team. Do you think that's one of the best ways of doing that, having those meetings? So everyone going around saying, what was the structure you just mentioned?
Well, there are different versions of it. I call it YTH, yesterday, today, and this is where I need help, H. Some
YTH.
people call yesterday, today, and these are my blockers. I think that's a big negative. So I'm not saying it's perfect.
I think it's good though. Sounds good.
Something that a lot of teams find helpful. So, and then again, in a sense, it doesn't matter what your method is for taming the communications beast, but make sure you do have a method, because if you don't, the beast will take over.
Yeah.
So this goes back to the idea of having a team charter where you get the team together and say, look, how do we want to work together? And one of the things you discuss is, well, how do we want to communicate and when do we want to communicate? Okay. And I don't care what solution you come up with, but come up with a solution, try it, learn from it, and then amend it as you need to.
Yeah. I love your point about the why. And I think that's something we struggled with as well, is You're right. During during the conversations you have in the office, you kind of that why, the purpose, the reasoning comes naturally in the conversations. But then setting a goal or a target virtually, you do miss that element of why are we doing this? What's the purpose and the vision? And it's quite difficult to communicate that virtually.
And it's really hard. So that is why you need to get back into the office. And incidentally, what another way in which we found the office is really helpful, and I think you referred to it earlier, it creates natural boundaries. Between meetings, okay? So if you're in the office, you finish one meeting, you go out of that meeting room, you've probably got 5 or 10 minutes before the next meeting, you go to the restroom, you grab a cup of coffee, you have a chat with someone in the corridor, you decompress from the last meeting, and you get mentally prepared for the next meeting, think about, what do I need to say and who do I need to talk to, etc. So those 5-10 minutes of frictional time aren't lost time. They're incredibly valuable time. Now let's look at what happens remotely. You finish one Zoom meeting and bang, you're on to the next Zoom meeting.
I know, yeah, that's the big one, isn't it?
That critical 5 or 10 minutes is lost.
You don't have that anymore.
And it's a disaster. So what some firms are now doing is saying, if you're going to have Zoom meetings, they last 25 minutes or 50 minutes. Recreate that little gap, because it's not wasted time. It's really good time. So again, this is where everyone's just learning the whole time about how to make this work, and we're still learning. We're still in the foothills, but that's great, because I think it's going to be a far better in future.
Definitely. Far better. What about what about sort of professional development, coaching, training? That's a big concern. So I interviewed a chief HR officer recently on the show, and they've decided that, over 10,000 employees, they decided that they want every single employee back in the office full time, which was it wasn't well received, as you can imagine. And one of the reasons they quoted was that they are in in-office culture, which we've heard a few people say, and that they are worried about coaching and knowledge exchange, and they feel like the best way they can do that is by having everyone back in the office. There was a few other reasons, but those were two.
Okay. So there are two bits to that. One is the training bit, and the other is the all back in the office. Let's deal with both. the training bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Training is far, far harder when everyone is remote. So, and this is particularly acute for new employees. Where
that's exactly what they said, by the way, Joe. They said mainly for the new population of employees. Yeah, so you made a good point.
Because for them, you're not just training skills, although that is vital. You're training a way of working and a way of thinking, and that has to come from constant contact. Now, set against that, actually, what we're also discovering is that remote can be better for some sorts of training, because in the past, when you took a team off to the local hotel for a bit of training on something, you were kind of constrained to the local trainer, who might or might not be any good with his flip chart and pen and franchise theory. Now, you don't have to rely on the local bloke with a flip chart and a franchise theory. You can find the very best person in the world and get them online. Why not?
And it's more inclusive as well. You can get people that perhaps couldn't be in that room if you're a global organization, and they can also attend.
So there are some ways in which training can be better online, but I agree with the general sentiment that a lot of the richness of the training, especially for new employees, is lost when you're online. Now, does that justify saying everyone's got to be in all the time? I would say no. And if it is a legitimate choice to say everyone's got to be in all the time, but what you've now done is set up the classic contest, even war, between employer and employee. And my guess is that the employer can win the battle, but will lose the war. So in the short term, of course, the employer can insist that everyone's back in the office, and they will win that, and they can enforce that. And so battle won, okay? But if we believe there is a war for talent, then in the long term, they're likely to lose that war for talent, because people will make decisions. They will say, do I want to work for a firm which is all in the office? Well, maybe some people do, and that's fine. But there'll be an awful lot of really good talent that say, actually, I would like to have a couple of days where I'm working from home. Thank you very much. And they'll join the firm that lets that happen. So in the long term, I think the firms which are more flexible are more likely to win that war for talent. But let's see. This is capitalism. People make their own decisions, and it's gonna. That's a great experiment. We'll see what happens. Place your bets.
Yeah, I think again we're already seeing it. If I look at my personal network, or even speaking to other CHROs from organisations that have taken that stance. And even the research, I think Gartner brought out something recently, which was saying around like 70% of people have now reconsidering their job, or open to opportunities, which is like, wow. And even friends of mine who work for organizations that aren't offering that type of flexibility, who even who love their job, Joe, beforehand, are saying, you know what, I've discovered a new way of working over the last 15 months, and I don't want to give that up.
And this is where we need to be slightly careful, because there's a kind of COVID aristocracy and COVID proletariat has emerged. The aristocracy are the ones who are the people who are probably a little bit older, a bit more established in their firm. They have the networks of trust and influence, so they kind of know how to make things work in their firm, even when they're remote. They probably have a long commute to a nice house, so they're happy to get rid of the commute, but work at their nice house where they've got a place where they can work. So for them, COVID has been brilliant, and they're part of the COVID aristocracy. Now let's go to the new joiners, the new graduates, who may be in a flat share, and they've discovered they don't really like the people they're sharing with. They're working from the end of a bed. They're missing the social networks of the office. They don't have the networks of established networks of influence and trust. They don't know how to make things work. They are really suffering. So this belief that everyone should be in, everyone should be out, just doesn't work. It's a much more nuanced argument, I think, and we're going to find firms establishing quite creative and original responses to this. But what you can't have is all the new graduates in and all the old hands out. That is just another recipe for disaster. So again, there's got to be some discipline.
You're right
about that.
I can't imagine joining being in my first job in a company and being fully remote. The new grads that are coming out, they've got a real tough time, haven't they?
I think the new grads have really suffered on this. I even wondered maybe the best thing they could have done, taken a year off, but they'd have taken a year off and been sitting in a bed sit for a year.
There's no way they can go traveling, is it?
No, exactly. So I mean, one way or the other, they have drawn an incredibly short straw, and unfortunately, the evidence is that if you get a poor start, it's really hard to make that up. So again, the challenge for HR leaders is, you've got a kind of a cohort that's been shortchanged. You're going to have to work overtime to invest in them, support them, and help them, because they're way behind.
It's right, because when you walk into a workplace as a grad, it's like learning through osmosis and the environment and those little coffee conversations and lunchtime and just all those things. That's where you start building your network, meeting people, and you can't really. It's quite hard to quantify that and recreate that virtually as well. So outside of their own teams, they probably don't know anyone right now. Outside of their team that they've been meeting on Zoom, they probably have never even met anyone else in the organization.
And trust is a huge issue in any organization. So I mean, teams are built on trust, because teams are all about mutual dependency. You have a team when I can't achieve my goals without the rest of the team achieving theirs. So mutual dependency, trust. Okay. How do you build trust? Well, we know it's exceptionally hard, close to impossible, to build it remotely. Okay. So when I was doing the research for global teams, probably the biggest issue that came up was, how do you build trust remotely and across cultures and across languages and across borders and time zones? And at one point, the solution to how do you build a good global team appeared to be hire a castle for the team and get everyone drunk, which actually was great, but it wouldn't really work in the Middle East. So we had to come up with a slightly more sophisticated formula. But the basic message was, even on a global team, to build the team, you need to get the team together physically. Buy those train tickets, buy those plane tickets, whatever.
Yeah.
Spend the money, get together. And it's actually just the same with hybrid working. You have to get the team together, and actually do spend money on that slightly stupid off-site event.
We do the same thing, Joe.
The off-site event with endless back-to-back training and business sessions. Have some social time, because the social time is really, really important. That's where you build the bonds. And these are very unnatural things for me to say. I am the ultimate task-oriented person. And here I am saying, well, actually, you've got to have some social time and celebrate. And I'm like, blimey, this is totally unnatural, but it is vital. And again, I was speaking with HR director of a very major social media company, and she was saying she got stuck in Paris one day and couldn't fly back to London, which was traumatic. Even more traumatic because she discovered she had to take a train, and being American, that didn't really go down very well with her. So she took a train with 4 or 5 of her global team members, and she said it was like a miracle, because by the time she got off the train, this group of individuals that didn't really know each other and didn't really trust each other, they all trusted each other, loved each other, and they were a team. The quality of communications was transformed, and it was great. And I just looked at her sort of like, well, yes, that is exactly what I would expect.
Yeah, have a chat.
It's just be human. Just be human, get together and be human with other humans. It does work.
What about yourself personally? We were talking about well-being earlier. What have you been doing throughout this time to take care of Joe?
Routines are important. So if you can't just let the day drift, you've got to try and create, routines for when you're going to do, different sorts of work. For my sins, I try and run 15 kilometers every morning, a socially distanced 15 kilometers every morning, which means
you do 15K every morning.
In the morning.
You do 15K every morning.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you think you've ever seen Quasimodo with a hangover lurching around the park, that would in fact be me going for my socially distanced run. Wow.
I can't even, that sounds like doing a 5K every day would be hard enough, but you're doing 15K. That is pretty impressive.
It gets you going for the day. And actually, the city is beautiful when you've got it to yourself. It's just staggeringly beautiful.
Do you live in the city?
Yeah. So I run around all the parks. It's just I run around all the parks around the Thames.
It's nice, isn't it? Because my co-founder Shane, he does a lot more riding, but there's a few times I've joined him, and riding around the city during the pandemic was like amazing. Like no traffic, no tourists. It was just really nice, like to have a nice ride around, and it's strange, it's quite surreal.
Well, it was strange and surreal, and it was brilliant, and actually, but this is a message, isn't it? That we can all see the downsides of the pandemic for both professional and personal life, but all you got to say is, okay, it's not bad, it's not worse, it's not better, it's different. That's the critical thing. It's just different. So how do you make the most of it being different? Yeah. And personally, one of the things that is different is the city is empty. So whoopee, make the best of it. All these things we can sort of go around and say, oh, ain't it dreadful? But actually, you're right. All change brings opportunity.
We need to focus on those things. That's what I try to do in the morning now, is just wake up and focus on the things that, just have that attitude of gratitude, and like for the quality time that I get to spend with my daughter now.
There you go.
Like the flexibility, obviously the thing you just mentioned. There's so many things. Obviously the shift, the work itself's fundamentally shifted, and as you said in the beginning of the call, which is taken us over 200 years, I think you said,
200 years.
to make that happen as well. Do you think, what do you think that HR needs to do then to sustain this momentum?
So look, HR, I think, has a vital role in helping firms figure out what is the new way of working, right? HR is absolutely at the center of that. So that should be the mission for every HR leader. You are the shock troops of this revolution. You've got to figure out this new way of working for individuals and for firms. There's a huge amount that goes into that. We are at the beginning of that process of discovery. My book, Smart Work, sort of lays out this is what we're seeing as the emerging best practices. And they go, there are endless different best practices and hacks that are in there. But it's a combination of being very structured, purposeful, and deliberate about all your decision making around it, but also experimenting like crazy, learning quickly, and then adapting quickly. So we're entering a world where people don't know all the answers. So that's great. Create the answers that work for you, and then be brutal about plunging the best practices and plunging all the knowledge from all your HR colleagues in other firms, and from great books like Smart Work, of course, my editorial for the book. I know that you bring together a lot of HR directors. That's exactly the sort of thing that should be happening, to encourage that discussion, to encourage that ferment of learning, because we're now about to enter a really rapid learning era. And the firms which succeed are going to be the firms which not only learn fastest, but adapt fastest. So, all the HR directors are absolutely in the forefront of that. So no pressure then, but hey, everything depends on you.
There's definitely never been a more exciting time to be working the space, but also a stressful time to be in. And to your point, though, it's been incredible to see the collaborations across organizations, even with competitors, where HR executives are working together. They understand they don't have all the answers. So working together is the best way. And it's been incredible actually to see even our network pollination with different leaders reaching out to each other and helping each other as well. It's actually incredible.
So again, do not try and do this alone. In the movies, the lone hero changes the world. In the real world, the lone hero kind of burns out and fails, basically.
It's true.
So this is the time to reach out, work the networks, be collaborative, and learn quicker that way. So again, I'll now do the editorial for you. Just join the network.
Join the network and get Jo's book. On that point, Jo, well, thanks so much for joining us. Where can people learn, if they want to connect with you, reach out to you personally, where can they do that? And also, where's the best place to grab a copy of the book?
Right. So grab a copy of the book on Amazon, and I will settle for the glowing 5-star review if you can do that as well. It'll be available from November. And look, I'm delighted to be able to work with and talk with great HR leaders. So reach me directly at Jo at ilead.guru, ilead.guru. That's nice and memorable. Jo at ilead.guru. And it's just Jo, not JOE. Okay.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Jo. And for anyone listening, the links are already in the description. So click the link in the description, grab a copy of the book, connect with Jo there as well. But apart from that, it's been a pleasure, Jo, having a chat with you. And I would say one day I'll come for one of those runs of you, but I think I'll make it about 5K. So maybe you have to just... You'll
go faster than me, I can assure you.
All right. Well, listen, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll chat to you soon.
It's great. Been a pleasure. Many thanks. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.